remember seeing any of those wonderful disciples of Srila Prabhupada was on a television talk show that aired from Denver, Colorado. I was living in Cheyenne, Wyoming at the time. Oh, how many ladies are talking? How much time do we each have? Well, Concha's here. She's not coming? And then 15th, 15:30, 45? Okay.
Do you want to speak too?
Anyway, so I can really relate to that invocation because these devotees that I saw on the talk show, I was very, very impressed. It was Anuradha and Kurushreshtha from the Denver temple. And they both looked like effulgent angels from Vaikuntha. I didn't know anything about Vaikuntha, but I kind of knew about angels. And when I saw those devotees, I really wanted to be one of them. Excuse my voice, I have a sore throat. Anyway, so I found out that these were the Hare Krishnas and that they distribute their books at what was then called Stapleton Airfield in Denver, the airport terminal in Denver. So I trucked on down to Denver. It takes 2 hours to drive there from Cheyenne if you go the speed limit. And I went right to the airport, walked in, and the first person I saw was Anuradha, the lady who was on the television. So I tried to approach her, but I saw that she was busy. She was talking to someone. She was distributing a book. So I turned to look for someone else, and Dattatreya Prabhu, I later found out his name was Dattatreya. He was wearing saffron. He came up to me and he started talking to me about this book. He put a book in my hands. And I recognized it was the same book I had seen in a bookstore in Cheyenne a couple years before, and I had picked it up then and I couldn't decipher. Although it looked beautiful to me, I couldn't understand what the book was saying. So he started describing the pages, turning the pages in my hands. And I said, yes, I came to get one of your books. And he was a little taken aback because who comes to the airport to buy a book? But I had heard that they distribute the books. I didn't hear that they sell them. So I came with no money. So when he concluded his presentation, and he said, so we don't sell these books, but we ask for a donation. Then I was like, oh no, I don't have any money on me. And I looked at my brother who had driven me there, and I said, Donnie, do you have any money? So we both reached in our pockets. We were wearing jeans, and I pulled out a dollar and something, and he pulled out $1 and something, and we came up with $2.38. So I handed that to Dattatreya, and he said, well, I can't give you that book, but I can give you this one. So he gave me a paperback, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and he took a piece of strawberry incense. The Denver temple was also a spiritual sky outlet at that time, a spiritual sky factory. So he took a piece of strawberry spiritual sky incense and he put it in the book as a bookmarker. And talk about aromatherapy. All the way home, I was just relishing that strawberry incense and reading that book. I just let my brother do the driving, and I just read and read and read until I was completely finished with the book. And when I finished that book, I did something that I had never seen anybody else do before. I was brought up Catholic, and in Catholicism, you do not bow down on the floor, you genuflect, right? Anybody else here Catholic? Anyway, in the Catholic Church, you don't bow all the way down to the floor. You bend down on one knee. So, but I bowed down all the way on the floor and I said, thank you, God, because I had been praying to Jesus. Please show me the absolute truth. Please lead me to the absolute truth. So when I read this book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, I knew that Jesus had led me to the absolute truth. So he introduced me to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. So I want to give recognition first to my Bhartma Pradarshika Guru, Jesus. And I would like to offer my humble obeisances to all of you, and thank you for being sincere devotees. Srila Prabhupada, every time he would say the Prematwani prayers, he would end by saying, thank you very much. And I always felt like Prabhupada was saying, thank you for chanting Hare Krishna. Thank you for being devotees. So thank you all very much for your dedication, your sincerity, pushing through all the challenges of life and devotional service. It's challenging. The first thing I remember about Srila Prabhupada, besides getting a book, was when I saw him the first time. I didn't know what to expect. I had only seen his face in photographs, so I didn't know what to expect. And I said this the other day when we spoke on Tuesday night, that when Srila Prabhupada came through the temple room door, it was the old temple room in LA. It was all pink and yellow, very, very bright colors, like a big birthday cake. And so when Prabhupada came through his door, he looked so regal, and he was holding his cane, of course. Either his cane or his danda or both, I can't remember. But the first thing he did was he looked in the eyes of all the devotees. And then he said to Shaji Devi, Karandar's wife, is everything okay? And of course, if Srila Prabhupada looks in your eyes with his swimmingly beautiful, deep eyes, how are you going to remember any of your troubles? You immediately forget them because you immediately are transported to the spiritual world. If you saw Srila Prabhupada's eyes, you were immediately transported to the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada's, everything about Prabhupada was completely transcendental, but his eyes were especially astounding. And they were always wet, isn't it? Prabhupada's eyes were always wet, at least every time I saw him. So then Prabhupada, he would look at the children, and there was one special little girl who was very precocious, and she loved Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada loved her, and he patted her on the head. And then he went and he offered dandavats to all three altars. Then he would climb up on the Vyasasana, and everything was absolutely graceful. He did everything for Krishna, that's why. He was totally Krishna's instrument, and everything he did was for Krishna's pleasure. So he was just totally, completely graceful. And after he sang Jai Radha Madhava, then he would begin the Bhagavatam class. And this was 1973, and so it was still a little bit, the men and the women, they did stay on two sides of the temple room at that time, but I think I was a little conditioned from the material world, and I was a little bold and a little brassy, so I would go early to the Bhagavatam class, and I would sit down at the corner of Prabhupada's Vyasasana, the very lowest step. I would just plant myself there, and I wouldn't move, because I wanted to be as close to Prabhupada as I could. And it seemed like I always got my spot. But one time, I don't know what happened, but I was in a grumpy mood that morning. And I have never been able to find this documented, but I heard it. Okay, I was standing over by Gornitai's altar in the old temple room. Prabhupada was on his Vyasasan, and I don't know why I was standing, but I was standing. Everybody else was sitting. And I don't know why I was in a grumpy mood. I was probably PMSing or something. And I was just not Krishna conscious that morning. And Prabhupada, when he started speaking, he was going on and making wonderful points. And then I don't know how he led into it, but I just remember this one little sentence. He looked straight at me and he said, "We are all more or less asura." Does anybody remember that? Was anybody in LA that morning? I swear he said it, but I've never been able to find it. Anyway, he made an impression on me. You shape up, you shape up and appreciate where you are. You appreciate what you've got. Here you are in the temple room with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotee, the emissary directly from the spiritual world, and you're grumpy? No. You cheer up, okay? Appreciate what you have. So I think all of us can learn from that. So I wanted to share some. Okay, I have about 4 minutes left. Prabhupada was always teaching. He was always teaching us lessons in everything that he did. So I remember one time, Tushti came up to me when I was really brand new, and she said, "Would you like to do some service?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "You can clean Srila Prabhupada's spittoon." So I cleaned Srila Prabhupada's spittoon, but I was warned. Now this is the lesson, that you never pour Srila Prabhupada's spittoon into the drain of the sink, okay? Because, this is my understanding, according to Manu Samhita, that you don't contaminate water with stool, urine, or mucus. Okay, we all do that all the time, I'm sure, because of the crazy system that we have, the plumbing systems that we have. But long ago, when we first started coming to India, everybody was passing outside on the ground, right? And they would spit on the ground, and it would get dried up by the sunshine. So Prabhupada taught me that. That was one of the first lessons. Excuse me, I may be being paged here. Okay, so please excuse me, I have to go soon. But, and another lesson that Srila Prabhupada taught was do not slam doors. When people would slam doors in the temple, he said it would crack his heart. So we need to be gentle. We need to be respectful toward each other. Close doors quietly. It's a simple thing. It's kind of, elementary, one would think. But it was just one of the little lessons Prabhupada taught us. Oh, and another thing he taught us was, I used to have the service of cleaning his vases, his flower vases from his room upstairs. And at one point, he chastised us because we were throwing away good flowers. He said, "Don't throw away good flowers. You use them again until they're worn out." So he didn't want us wasting Krishna's Lakshmi by throwing away good flowers and replacing them with really fresh flowers right away. He wanted us to be more frugal. One time, Srila Prabhupada walked across the street from the temple into what is, I guess now, the pink building. It used to be the green building or something. I can't remember all the colors it's been. But I was living in an apartment building at the time that Srila Prabhupada came. Prabhupada came right after I joined. I joined in November of 1973, and Prabhupada came in December. And so that was a real blessing. And Srila Prabhupada, he would come across the street and he would sometimes visit an apartment here or there, or like you say here in India, a flat. So we would all clean our apartments in hopes that Srila Prabhupada would visit our home. But while Srila Prabhupada was walking down the corridor, there was a playground in the back of the building, and then Prabhupada turned around, and as he was walking back toward the front, one devotee named Mahajan, Prabhu, handed him a glass chalice. It's a pretty kind of cup with a top like this and a stem. And it was made of glass, and it had hand-squeezed orange juice in it. They were giving a loving offering to Prabhupada. But Prabhupada didn't accept it. And I didn't know why, but I heard later that Prabhupada didn't accept it because it was offered in a glass. You remember that? Yeah. Okay. Time's up for me, but I'll just tell you one more little item. Srila Prabhupada taught me a quiet little lesson one day. I came from a very exuberant background. I was brought up with 7 brothers, and of course I had to learn how to play football with my brothers. And so I was kind of like a tomboy in certain ways. So when Srila Prabhupada first came into the new temple room in New Dwarka, we were so proud of the new temple room because we had worked so hard on it. We had, made these cow stencils all along the walls and really, really meticulous work. We had painted the ceilings above the deities with certain colors and very, very fine paintbrushes. Really worked for hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks on that temple room. So we were very, very happy to welcome Srila Prabhupada into the new temple room. When Prabhupada came in, we were having a rip-roaring kirtan, and all the girls were on the floor with all the boys. We were all kind of mixed together, very excited. And I was jumping so high and screaming, "Jai Prabhupada!" I must have been really a spectacle. And Srila Prabhupada turned around, and you know how he opens his eyes really wide? He looked at me like that, and I thought, oh, I guess ladies don't do this. So Prabhupada very, very sweetly and quietly communicated to me that ladies should be a little more discreet. Okay, please excuse me for leaving. One of our adopted sons is getting initiated right now, so he wanted me to be there for his initiation. Will you all excuse me? Hare Krishna. Wish I could stay and hear all of you speak. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you all for coming. I hope I could say something worthwhile. Parvati, thank you for arranging this, as usual. So, first time I saw Prabhupada was in San Francisco Rath Yatra. And I had seen a picture of Prabhupada, and I was already convinced he was my guru. And the temple president of Laguna Beach told me that he'll be in San Francisco Rath Yatra, so I don't know how I got there, but somehow or other I got there. And Prabhupada came out of the van, and I remember Guru Kripa was chanting, and Karandar and his brother Keshava were they were the guards guarding Prabhupada. And then I just kind of started crying, to meet my spiritual master the first time. And there was this woman there, and she said to me, "Oh, you finally came." And so I thought about that for a long time, like, wow, how did she know, this woman? And then I gazed upon Prabhupada, and all Prabhupada kept on saying was, dance. And so, but I wanted to look at Prabhupada. So I kept on turning around, and every time I turned around, Prabhupada would say, dance, dance. So that was the whole parade of going back and forth, but staying close, because Prabhupada used to stay on Subhaja's cart. So I stayed very close to the cart the whole parade. And then during the parade, I made this pact to myself that I wouldn't go, I would just be with Prabhupada forever. That's it. There's no way I'm going to ever leave Prabhupada. And then the parade stopped, and Prabhupada got up and left. And then my heart broke. And then, I don't know, I kind of like thought, well, I guess he gave a lecture. And then, because it was like thousands of people, there was a sea of people. It was in Golden Gate Park. I don't know how many people have been in San Francisco Golden Gate Park. 71. Now the Rath Yatras, they're nice, but they're not like thousands of people, but they're really sweet. So kind of Prabhupada vanished. And I think I went to the San Francisco temple at that time to see him. Then he went to LA, and then I followed him to LA. And at that time, there was a really nice community in Los Angeles, but my husband at the time was not ready to surrender. So we went across country and wound up in Boston Temple. And Satsrupa was the temple president, and then I was ready. I couldn't go on anymore. And I joined the temple, and then Satsrupa, he sent us to Henry Street, Brooklyn, because all the whole press went at that time. And Prabhupada was in Henry Street, and so I wanted to go. And it was a really nice temple there. And luckily, I had a really nice service. I got to clean Prabhupada's room. And it was one of the best services you can do, besides making Prabhupada's garland. But there was such a long list. You had to be really up there in you know. Everything was how you joined. If you joined a day less than somebody else, they were your superior. So basically, I was really at the bottom of the list. But I got to clean Prabhupada's rooms, and his rooms were very nice in Henry Street. Do you remember, Kanchabala? There was a white floor and blue, baby blue. It's very sweet. And in the back, there was this beautiful courtyard and a tree. And so basically what we did was we used eucalyptus oil on the floor and dusted his desk. And just being in there and knowing that Prabhupada sat down and touched everything, and it was very, very sweet. And then Prabhupada came, of course, and we were all, every time Prabhupada would come to the temple, everyone would get excited. So at this particular time, it was a brownstone, it was 5 floors. And we painted the ceiling different colors. And when Prabhupada arrived, he wanted to know why we were doing this and why we were not on Sankirtan. So basically that was Prabhupada's mood. And so basically we were all given a bag and books and sent out. And on the weekends we would go in a van with no seats and go to Times Square. And somehow or other on the way back, there was always more people than we started with. And that goes for the Sunday feasts too. People would come to the Sunday feasts and they wouldn't leave. So it was a big, the people were joining left and right, and things were growing. Our little family was growing really huge at that time. Then I went to Miami. So I was going, then I went to LA because Prabhupada was staying in LA long time, like 3 months at a time. And in Henry Street, he only stayed 3 days. In most of the smaller temples, Prabhupada only stayed 3 days. But in LA, he made his headquarters, and his quarters were very beautiful there. And Prabhupada did a lot of work because the press was there, all the artists. So he got a lot of work done. And I used to walk down the alley. There was an alley behind the temple. And at 3 o'clock, you can see Prabhupada's head in the window and the light on because he'd be translating. And even though he had a really tight schedule, he would translate, and then he would go on his morning walk, and he would give Bhagavatam class. Then after the Bhagavatam class, he would give out cookies to the children. And then in the afternoon or late morning, he would go into his garden and read his letters. And that was also fun because we got to see him in the garden. The women weren't allowed. But we made little holes in the fence, and we got to see through the holes. And unfortunately, they got rid of the fence. But, that was sweet. And the women who had children weren't allowed in the temple at that time. So we were in another room with a speaker. So we didn't want to miss any of the nectar. So then from there, I went to Miami, Coconut Grove. And there also Prabhupada came, and it was also very sweet because Prabhupada spoke in the evening under the banyan trees. And, I had children, and one day I really wanted to listen to Prabhupada. And Tamal Krishna would make all the women and children leave. But this one particular night, I was really thinking, no, I don't want to leave. So I sat down and I didn't get up. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying, no, you got to go. And Prabhupada saw. And Prabhupada said, no, she can stay. So it was really sweet. And I guess Prabhupada always knew my mind. I couldn't keep anything from him because he could read minds. And a lot of times, because of the situation, we were young, and Prabhupada knew that our whole life was him at that point. And so he would always shake his head and like, okay, it'll be all right later, don't worry, things will be, like a loving father, very sweet, he would understand. So anyway, getting back to the banyan tree, that particular, I don't remember I wish I did, and I could tell you, but I don't remember what the lecture was about. But at the end, Prabhupada laughed, and he laughed at Tamal for, trying to shoo me away. So I'm glad I took a stand on that. Okay. I just wanted to say that Prabhupada is here, and all these remembrances that we have are still with us, and he's still here organizing things, because how would this big temple go on? How? Just through Prabhupada. Prabhupada's managing ISKCON. He is the managing acharya for, this was his baby, and he never deserted us, and he's very present all the time. He doesn't leave us for a second. And I don't know about you, but I have dreams about Prabhupada, and I feel him all the time. And so my stories are still going on, but they're more internalized, not so external. Okay. So I just wanted to say that Srila Prabhupada's disciples, I could say for myself, we were really misfits. Somehow or other, Prabhupada took the lowest of the low and tried to transform us into Brahmins. And that was his mood. He knew he had us because he loved us, and it was very apparent. We were all very attached to Prabhupada, and we are still very attached to Prabhupada because the love was so pure and genuine, and that we could distribute it to everybody, his love, and it's still going on. Most of us were from meat-eating backgrounds, and also that didn't make any difference for Srila Prabhupada. We were untouchable, but still Prabhupada initiated us, and he allowed us to do devotional service in a high standard with deities that he installed, Krishna himself, coming from low families, all of us. I mean, I could talk about myself. The mercy of him allowing us to do that service. He installed Radha Krishna, and we were just serving him, serving Radha Krishna, but he allowed that. So I just wanted to appreciate that and tell you that he nourished the spark, and he transformed us into, well, he called us, we were students. So, and he tried to transform us. And everything that we have right now is from Prabhupada. He came to India and he established these temples, Mayapur, Vrindavan, for us. So we can come here and get the benefit and associate with each other and make some advancement and become purified. And thank you. Thank you, Parvati. So this my sister, Kanchabala, she is a very old disciple. She came when she was 15. She joined the early days, and she has a lot of nectar. She probably, the other day she spoke, but she probably just hit a little bit of it, and she's shy, so, and very humble, unlike me.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to leave off where we were speaking the other evening. Srila Prabhupada's so kind that he's engaging us in service, just like David Dahiti was saying, in that he's encompassing the whole world. And even back then, there was only a few temples, but we just felt like we're taking over the world, because of Prabhupada's potency. Anyway, I left off about living at home and how Srila Prabhupada, he introduced things very slowly. I remember at that same time when I had Lord Jagannath at home in the altar, I described before, a devotee about that time frame asked Srila Prabhupada, because they saw some beautiful Radha Krishna deities in Srila Prabhupada's closet in his quarters upstairs at 26 2nd Avenue. There is the temple, if people know the layout, and you go through a courtyard, then you go upstairs, and there is Srila Prabhupada's room, and a devotee found little Radha Krishna deities, and they said, "Oh, can we worship them?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "No, if I told you all the rules and regulations, you would faint." And it really affected everybody. Oh, we can't. It was way above our understanding. Anyway, when David Dahiti was mentioning about cleaning Srila Prabhupada's quarters, it made me think my first direct interaction with Srila Prabhupada was when he came to 26 2nd Avenue, and he didn't come that often, because it was warmer in California. Like David Dahiti said that actually he'd be a few days on the East Coast, but Srila Prabhupada would be on the West Coast for weeks and weeks, and we were like pining away. But anyway, when Srila Prabhupada came, I, along with a few other god sisters, were cleaning Srila Prabhupada's quarters when Srila Prabhupada went on a walk. And there were 2 rooms where Srila Prabhupada took prasadam and translated books and had darshan, devotees having darshan with Srila Prabhupada. And there was a window in between the 2 rooms. And then in the next room, there was Lord Jagannath, big deities, this high, and they didn't have clothes on. Everyone just ate, slept in front of them. This was just, we didn't know anything. But anyway, so Srila Prabhupada was taking his morning walk, and he came back, and we were really trying to clean quickly so not to be in the way when he came home, back to his room. But it just so happened he came back a little earlier. We had it timed that he would be back at a certain time. And he came back, and I was still cleaning the other room, and he went into the room where he was staying, and he sat down, and he saw me, and immediately, of course, I bowed down, and I got up, and he said, "Are you initiated?" And he went like that with his neck beads. I went, "Oh yes, Swamiji," because that's what we called Srila Prabhupada then. And he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "Kanchan Bala." And he said, Kanchan Bala Dasi. And just how he said it was so melodious and beautiful. And anyway, I wanted to say things in order. One time we went up to Montreal, and Srila Prabhupada was up there. I was still living at home, but at that point, my mother was letting me go to the temple on the weekends. And we were all so excited. I can't even remember how we got up there, but we got up there. And Montreal Temple was a big bowling alley. It was huge compared to 22nd Avenue. It was gigantic. Anyway, there was a nice vyasana for Srila Prabhupada. And I remember, he was giving classes. At that point, things were getting more strict, protecting Srila Prabhupada's health and his energy that he was living. He was residing in someone's apartment a few minutes away from the temple, so no one knew where Srila Prabhupada was staying. So at one point, a devotee went up to me and said, "Can you bring over this grocery bag of boga to Srila Prabhupada's apartment for Himavati to cut up fruit and make an offering to Srila Prabhupada?" And so I was like overjoyed. I was told where to go. And so when I got to the door, I really didn't want to disturb Srila Prabhupada. So I knocked very, very softly, just enough for Himavati, who was serving Prabhupada. And so she opened the door just a crack, and it was like very, very small crack. And I just kind of looked down, not being crude about it, but just looking, and I saw Srila Prabhupada sitting with his saffron flowing robes, and he was sitting chanting japa. And so I gave Himavati the grocery bag of boga, and Srila Prabhupada asked Himavati, who's at the door, and Himavati said, "Kanchanbala came to bring some boga for me to prepare," and Prabhupada said, "Tell her to come in." And I was just so moved. I just like melted and just collapsed, offering obeisances on the floor to Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, "Sit down." And so I was alone in the room with Srila Prabhupada, and we were chanting japa together. And I was like, it was just so ecstatic to be with Prabhupada. And at one point I started thinking, what can I say to Srila Prabhupada? I wanted to ask him a question, but I was very, very shy. I didn't know what to say. And so at one point, Srila Prabhupada said to me, how's the weather? What is the weather like? Because he was going to the airport that morning, and I said, oh, it's very cold, Srila Prabhupada, because it was like in November up in Montreal, which gets really cold up there. So then at that point, I was there for a while, and then the temple presidents came in, and at that time there were no sannyasis, and they were all sitting around Srila Prabhupada in a semicircle, and I was more to the back. And then Himavati came out with cut up fruit for Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada popped a piece of fruit in his mouth, and then he started handing everyone a piece of fruit. And I was towards the back, and I was thinking, oh, I can't lean forward. It's presumptuous just leaning over everybody to get a piece of fruit. And then Srila Prabhupada looked at me, and his eyes wide open, said, take. And I immediately leaned forward and took a piece of fruit. And this went around. Srila Prabhupada did it 3 times, and each time I definitely leaned forward to get a piece of fruit. And it was just so nice being with Srila Prabhupada in the room. And then as time went on, I was still living at home. I was 17, and my mother, like I explained last time, was really, it caused an upset in my family that I became a devotee. But she just kind of acclimated, just resigned that I was a devotee, and I was just following a program, you know, coming home from school, offering my food to Krishna or Jagannath, and then, you know, just, you know, continuing with my, program. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada wanted all the girls to get married, and he was saying all the girls should learn how to cook and sew, and Himavati was teaching us. And at one point, and I was still going to school. At one point, one of my god sisters was engaged to someone, and I just had a feeling, oh, I think I most probably will be next. I just had that feeling. There were like 5 of us. And then one day in the evening, Brahmananda Prabhu called me. He was the temple president. He was my first temple president. And he started preaching to me, telling me how all the girls should not be independent. Srila Prabhupada said they're always protected. And he was going on and on and on. And right inside my mind, I was thinking, why won't he just tell me, get to the point? Because I knew. And finally, he said, so, Madhusudan Prabhu wants to get married. And my mother was like, exactly where you're sitting. And I was like, all along at this time, I was trying to preach very gently to my mother, just being very, not disturbing her mind, or, just reassuring her. Everything's going along nicely. I'm working hard at school. Anyway, so when Brahmananda said that, I said, I'll think about it. And this is on the phone. And then he said, what is there to think about? You do it for Krishna. And so right away I said, okay. I was like, I didn't know. We didn't know each other. The most we ever said was Hari Bol in the temple. And even though it was like a family, we didn't speak much to each other, but it was like a family, Anyway, so I hung up the phone. I was like white as a sheet, and my mother said, what is it? And I said, oh, I'm just getting married. And I walked out of the room. I was just so like, overwhelmed. I was off guard. So my mother was, of course, upset. Everything was kind of, going along. And so at that point, when Srila Prabhupada came to New York, my mother got to speak to Srila Prabhupada, and I'm just so grateful that she got to have association with Srila Prabhupada. And the thing about my mother, she was very respectful. She wasn't the type to raise, start screaming or yelling or anything. She was very respectful to Srila Prabhupada. So she went up to his quarters and she was able to speak with him. And a devotee told me this because my mother couldn't understand Srila Prabhupada, his accent, but she was questioning about, how I'm too young to get married, and Srila Prabhupada said a girl should always be protected in her childhood, her father, and then her husband, and then in old age, her children, her son. And so my mother didn't understand anything, but I was just so excited that she was going to speak to Srila Prabhupada. And at the end, when she came back, I said, "What did Prabhupada say? What did Swamiji say?" And she said, "I didn't understand anything, but he's a very wise man, and he fulfills your fatherly image." And I was just so happy she said that, because my parents weren't living together, and that she could see Srila Prabhupada like that made me so happy. And so a few months had passed, and Madhusudan wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and he was going back and forth about getting married because, even in those days, even though it was just the beginning, it was always recommended best to remain brahmachari, but if you have to, you get married. But there's always a connotation then it's Maya, especially in New York. The West Coast was a little more, relaxed, but in New York it was more, resolute, strict. Anyway, he wrote Srila Prabhupada his doubts, and Srila Prabhupada wrote back such a beautiful letter to him that it just made it so clear. We had his blessings. He wrote, "I give you clear sanction to get yourself married to Kanchanbala Dasi at the earliest possible date. From your side, I have agreed, and from her side, her mother has agreed. So get married, And
Still together.
It was just such a beautiful letter. It was just so, it kept us together, actually. In the beginning, it was very hard because we had no role models, and, for years, there was no role models, and that letter really kept us together, and it was just so clear. Srila Prabhupada was so kind, and so anyway, when we got this letter, it was just very reassuring, consoling. But then I had a little minuscule of independent streak, thinking, he's having doubts. I'm happy being a brahmacharini. I was 17, and I was thinking, I don't need, I'm happy as I am. And then Srila Prabhupada came to New York again, and I remember so this was my mentality about, this is just another example of Srila Prabhupada reading everybody's minds, that he would just, amazing what he revealed. But anyway, so that was my mentality. I was thinking like that, and so us two couples went up to see Srila Prabhupada have darshan, Leela Sukha and Uddhava, and Madhusudan Prabhu and me. So we went up to Srila Prabhupada's room, and we sat down in front, offering obeisances, sat with Srila Prabhupada, and at one point, there was a little talk back and forth, and I never asked a question to Srila Prabhupada before. I was always so shy. I mean, a lot of my god sisters and god brothers could ask so many questions, but I always felt like whatever I ask, I'm going to be wasting Prabhupada's time, and I didn't want to do that. But there was one question I did have, because nobody knew. I asked a lot of my god brothers and god sisters, what does my name mean? And I had no idea. So when we were sitting with Srila Prabhupada, at one point there was a few seconds of silence, and I asked Srila Prabhupada, what does my name mean? And he said, Kanchanbala. Kanchan means golden, and Bala means child or woman. And it's one of the names of the gopis. And women are never independent. And I was like, my mouth just dropped. I mean, I was just amazed. And he got in a whole lecture about how women are never independent. They're always protected, by their family and their husband. And that just reconfirmed it. I was just so grateful to Prabhupada, and there's just so many stories of Srila Prabhupada, reading people's minds. I mean, just one, our god brother, Bardraj Prabhu, before he got initiated, his name was Mark or Mark, some Polish name. I'm not sure. But he always was dreaming, I want to be named Madam Mohan. I love that name. This is before his initiation. And then he went up and said obeisances after Srila Prabhupada chanted his beads and saying the 4 regulative principles. And then Srila Prabhupada was giving him his beads, and he said, "Is there anybody by the name of Madam Mohan?" And that was like amazing. And then a devotee, I forgot who answered, he said, "Yes, there's a Madam Mohan." He said, "All right, Bardraj." So Srila Prabhupada is just so amazing, Anyway, so what happened was, we didn't know when Srila Prabhupada was coming again to New York, but so we had Brahmananda. Brahmananda did the marriage ceremony, but then a week later, Srila Prabhupada came. But we got a sanction, so that's nice. Let's see. What's that?
What year was that you got married?
1969. 1969.
Summer of love.
Then, this is when we went to India in 1975. I'm kind of skipping on as years go on, but this is the first time I ever went to India. We went with ISKCON Press. It was called ISKCON Press at that time, which was in Brooklyn at Tiffany Place. And so all the devotees who worked on the press, at that time I was doing Sankirtan, distributing Back to Godhead magazines, and Madhusudan Prabhu worked on the press. We all got to go to India for the first time. I was 24 years old at that point. And I remember we landed in India. It was for Gaur Purnima in Mayapur, and everything was quite primitive. It was like really a culture shock for me. It was the first time ever going there. But we were so excited to see Srila Prabhupada. And it was really intense. I mean, it was not easy. The women were up a few stories somewhere out on the roof. We had mosquito nets to protect us, but we had to run down a few flights of stairs to the outhouse. It was really, so everyone was very not well, very physically uncomfortable, just adjusting, and there was no bottled water. I had amoebic dysentery, and people had different ailments. So, and the prasadam was not very balanced. Things were fried in buffalo ghee, and it was just kind of a challenging time. But the nature of Srila Prabhupada is like no matter what you went through, if it was either that or just some issue that was at hand, whenever you saw Srila Prabhupada and just being in his presence, and he'd ask, "Is everything all right?" Everything just washed away, just melted away. I mean, it was, it wasn't existent, just being in Srila Prabhupada, with Srila Prabhupada. So anyway, we were in Mayapur, we went to Vrindavan, and then we were in Hyderabad, and Srila Prabhupada was giving pandals every evening, lecturing, and thousands of people would come. And at one point, we were waiting for getting a ride. A group of God sisters were waiting to have a ride to go to Hyderabad, to the Pandal there. We were at a farm outside Hyderabad. Anyway, we're waiting, and all of a sudden, Srila Prabhupada comes out with a few devotees with Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada saw us, and he was very concerned. Are they coming to the Pandal? And the devotee said, yes, they're waiting for their ride. So Srila Prabhupada asked us, how are you? And we were saying, we're fine, Srila Prabhupada. We were just like so ecstatic to see him. And then he said, do you like India? And here we were all really not feeling well at all. I mean, admittedly, I was counting the days to go home. It was hard, But when Srila Prabhupada asked, of course we loved India because we were with Prabhupada. So, and then he asked, better than America? And then, admittedly, I don't remember the answer. No one said anything. I don't remember, Anyway, it was 40 years ago, so I just don't remember. But, just being in Srila Prabhupada's presence, it's like he'd come into the temple, like in LA. I just remember we'd have a rip-roaring kirtan, and it was just so loud, just resonating through the whole universes. And then right when Srila Prabhupada would enter, everyone was always anticipating his arrival. Everyone would just melt and bow down and offer obeisances. And just watching Srila Prabhupada gracefully move in, it was like the whole room was just surcharged. You could hear a pin drop. It was just so overwhelming. And that's the thing, we can still feel Srila Prabhupada today, his love, through devotional service, reading his books, and just not forgetting him and always remembering him. And just by love and cooperation together, because that's what Srila Prabhupada really wanted, for all of us to work together, and he'd be so pleased, just seeing devotees throughout the world just coming together here. Hare Krishna. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, he did write me a letter. He said, I am very glad you are painting. I want you to paint pictures of me, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. So at that point, I was in the art department when we were in Tiffany Place, before we moved, the press moved to LA in '75. I was working in the art department with Jadharani, and it's so, there is, actually I did when I was 17, my mother actually let me go to the temple in the summer, after, and stay with Jadharani and paint in Boston. And at that time, it wasn't for the books yet, it was for temples, so they could have paintings, the disciplic succession, Panchatattva, Sankirtan. And I remember writing Srila Prabhupada, and he was very pleased, and he said, continue your painting, that will gladden me and benefit society, like that. So he was very kind, he engaged all of us.
Did any of your paintings go into any of the books?
I did just a garland, but I wasn't that good with faces, and oil painting was not my, I wasn't that good. I do watercolors now, and I've done a book, a Krishna book for children, and a slideshow, and then there's another book I just finished. I want to get printed in time, but watercolors is that medium. But if there's any questions,
What did you do in Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles, when we relocated there, I distributed back to Godheads. I cooked for the deities, helped on the press a little, like that. Oh, that reminds me of a story. That's the last time I saw Srila Prabhupada. It was in the garden, in his quarters in the back, beautiful garden. And devotees would have darshan with Srila Prabhupada, having darshan of Prabhupada. And I remember all the devotees in charge would go get to see Srila Prabhupada, like the Sankirtan department, the press department, the DD department, everyone would go. And I remember I just did service here, service there, just different, things, but I wasn't in charge of anything. And I did artwork for the Gurukul classrooms, but nothing specific. And so every night, devotees were going, and I really wanted to see Srila Prabhupada be in the garden. And it was just so hard. By then there were so many devotees. When I joined, it was just like we spoke one evening, Vamandev Prabhu was here, that and Madhusudan Prabhu, we were up here, and there were just like 30, 40 devotees all together. And so you knew everybody, but now it got to a point, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of devotees wanting to go see Srila Prabhupada. And so it was, so each night for 2 weeks, there would be devotees going to see Srila Prabhupada. And at one point, I was just being humble, like, oh, okay, I'm not in charge of anything, and, who am I, but I still wanted to see Prabhupada, and I just felt Krishna was just testing me, how much did I really want to go out of desperation? And so at one point, it was the second week rolling around, and then I noticed the same devotees were going a second time. Well, that flipped me out. I mean, I was just like beside myself. I said, I gotta go see, just that desperation. And somehow or other, I got to go in, and it was just so wonderful. I remember it was a schedule to go in. I made sure, I was in the front of the line. I got there really, really early. I was just so anxiously waiting. And then we filed in when Srila Prabhupada sat down in the garden. And we all bowed down, and I had an offering to give him, and I handed it to him after saying obeisances before everybody got up. And Srila Prabhupada opened his eyes wide and said, oh, you are still here. And it just was just so encouraging and warm, just full of love and care. It was my spiritual father. And another thing I just thought of now was when cleaning Srila Prabhupada's apartment in Brooklyn on Henry Street. I remember I was really seriously scrubbing a baseboard, and we were trying to get out before Prabhupada came back, because we didn't want to bother Srila Prabhupada from his morning walk. And I remember really working on it, focusing, cleaning it, and all of a sudden I heard Hare Krishna, and I looked up, and there's Srila Prabhupada, and it was just so wonderful. Anyway, Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai.